This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and my guest today, John Bielinski Jr., went from Marine and practicing emergency medicine physician assistant to almost losing everything he cared about. His book, How to Correct Your Life, grew out of divorce, addiction, and a brutal look at the man he had become. This episode cuts into what happens when discipline finally meets emotional truth. John Bielinski, welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Joe, I am fantastic. I appreciate being on. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Happy to have you. And so I want to start by talking about the idea of like the forms of who John Bielinski is, because you're a Marine, ER clinician, you've done Ironmans, yet on paper, that seems like John Bielinski's got his life straightened out. And I want to start by, before we get into the nitty gritty about your life, but what happens to high performers like yourself that you're missing something? Because it seems like those three things I mentioned require a lot of what most people lack, and that's discipline. And that's having a North Star, knowing where they're going. Yet, for whatever reason, folks like yourself still find struggles. Shit still happens. What do you think it is about folks like you that have accomplished so much still are lacking in certain areas? Is there something that you've taken away from like going through this experience of living your life and writing the book?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I can speak for myself and being part of entrepreneurial groups. Couple drivers that can be off. Okay, first off is asking, what is your primary driver? What's your fuel? Is it ego? Is it ego? I want to be important. I want to be significant. I want to make something of myself. I want to make so much money. I have an outcome. Or is it altruism? Am I really trying to be a servant? And I can look at my own life and go, I went through a journey there. I went through a journey where, the first third of my professional career was ambitious. I got to make something of myself. And as I matured a little bit, as I actually saw the bigger picture, it moved way more to how do I serve others? So if you're an entrepreneur out there, that's the first question I have is what's driving you, and be super honest about that. That would be the first thing. And the second thing, what I found is, as I've worked with other entrepreneurs, we just lose balance. Like we get prioritizing our health or prioritizing our work, and something else suffers, our family life. Like if you're killing at work, how's your health? Okay, how's your level of happiness? So I found two major things. Number one is looking at your primary fuel and why you do what you do. And the second thing is people just seem to lose balance. They lose track of what's important until what's missing kind of hits a danger point and some life event awakes them to saying, hey, you better get back on course.
There is something to like, we've all seen this movie before, and you can go back storytelling thousands of years, and it's always a story of the ascendant human hitting a wall, falling all the way down, and working their way back up. And it is a cliche in storytelling, but you rarely have stories out there where person's poor, shit gets worse, and they stay poor. Like it's almost like this, what do you call it, the hero's journey that people go through. Is that just sort of like the way you broke down, like not knowing what your calling is, not balance? Is that just ingrained in us that this is, unless you are aware or an intentional of like your surroundings and the way you live, you are doomed to repeat this movie over and over again?
I don't know if I would say anybody's doomed. Like I look at my journey.
I tend to be dramatic, John.
But I get it. I hear it. And, life is hard. There's struggles. And I look at my life, and I was a guy who I didn't graduate high school on time because my grades were so bad, dyslexia and ADHD. And I just couldn't do well academically. I got an 8.10 on my SATs, and I had really little option other than going in the Marine Corps. And very interestingly, when I took the test to get in the Marine Corps called the ASVAB, I scored very high on it. So it opened up all sorts of doors. And Joe, this is super interesting to me. The SATs are a test of reading and mathematics. Okay, well, this ASVAB was practical knowledge, practical application, and I scored really high. And so that gave me tools. Being in the Marine Corps and being in a combat unit in Desert Storm and a specialized weapon system, I was privileged to be an anti-terrorist at NATO headquarters for 2 years. So that taught me a bunch of tools that I took into college and took into medicine that made me very effective. Now, when it comes to the hero's journey, my first job after a year working in the emergency room, I was fired from that job. And it was horrible, man. I got called into the office by the medical director, and he basically said, "We want you to find a new job. And if you leave quietly, we'll give you good references." And it was horrible, but very necessary, very necessary. Because Joe, I asked this question as a new graduate, as someone really getting into medicine, what's the most important feature? Is it confidence or competence? Which one is it? And I put some effort into that question. I really thought it was confidence. And that's why I was fired. Now, this is important. It wasn't necessarily the question, it's a false dichotomy. Those were ego-based answers. What's more important, my confidence or my competence? No, what's more important is how do you serve the patients that are in front of you? How do you work with your team? And I was living so full of ego. So, my friend, me being fired was one of the best things that ever happened to me. But it sure hurt at the time.
Hmm. And you write in the book about building a life that looked impressive on paper but felt hollow inside, are the words you use. What did your life look like on paper during those periods that, to the outside world, like, as John Bielinski's killing it. But what did your body know that, talk about your ego? What did your body know that your ego kept ignoring?
Great question. So for myself, had the wife, had the 2.3 kids, the picket fence house, everything looked very good. Um, Prioritizing my work. My work was my calling. People in life, your job is either a calling, it's a career, or just a job, right? So, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, my medical career was my calling, and I didn't quite see the relationship with my wife slowly decompensating. Like when things, like if things get really bad all at once, you take action, right? But when it gradually goes down, sometimes you miss it. And the same thing happened with my health. I was so focused on my career, my health wasn't a priority. And wearing scrubs all the time, scrubs are very forgiving to the waistline.
Right.
So for me, I noticed there was just like I was killing in one area, and I started lecturing nationally and getting, just really being high desired, but I was neglecting some of the most important things in my life. And if you're an entrepreneur out there, can you identify with that? Can you identify with one area of your life you're killing, two areas of life you're killing, but other areas are really out of balance? And that's what happened to me.
And one thing is funny, you describe you being the architect of your own collapse and your own comeback. Before we get to the comeback part, I'm curious, like during that collapse, there's always circumstances, or in layman's terms, shit happening that you blame like the sum of all parts on that circumstance. Oh, oh, my life went to shit because I got fired. Things are going bad because this thing happened. But like you mentioned, it's a slow decline. Things build up. What did you learn from that time of like owning like your mistakes? It sounds like you own them now, but I'm sure it probably took a little while to owning. Tell us about the idea of owning mistakes, which I think a lot of people, it's almost like a 12-step program where you have to admit that you were wrong or made mistakes before you can move on.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that, our thinking is predicated on the questions we ask ourselves. And, if we ask a bad question, you're going to get a bad answer. Albert Einstein said the significant problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. And I didn't quite understand that for a while, but it really came down to if you're asking the same questions, you're going to get the same answers. And if something happens and you say, well, who's to blame for this? I started asking questions like, what is it about my medical care that led to that outcome? What is it about my parenting that led to that outcome? What is it about my relationship with my wife, now ex-wife? What am I responsible for? So first off, it is very easy to want to blame. I'll tell you a story that really weighed heavy on me. So 2 years ago, I was at an all-inclusive resort in Cancun. Beautiful place, super high end. And I did some work, and it was the last day there. So I did some work, and at noon, I couldn't find my phone. I just couldn't find my phone anywhere. And I walked to the beach, and I remember I actually slipped and fell off of a dock, but I didn't, a little, but I don't think I had my phone. So then I pulled my phone up on my computer, like, where's my phone? And the phone was 10 minutes away in town. So I was really sure someone from housekeeping stole the phone. So I called the manager over. I said, I'm not accusing anybody anything, but the phone's in town. So they came back, searched the room. Okay, fine. So basically, my friend, I was not in a good headspace. My phone's expensive. There's a lot of stuff on that phone. But right away, I took the responsibility saying, I'm not going to blow up this day. I'm not going to blow up this day. I'm not going to lose a day on vacation. So I use a cheat code GOAT. I use this cheat code GOAT to change my state. G, gratitude. Like, what am I really, really thankful for? Big picture, my prosperity, my health, my family. Then I go to O, optimism. What am I really excited about in the future? And how does it make me feel? A is appreciation. Who do I love in my life? And who do I love? And how does that make me feel? And T is thankful. And I use that for the things that I have. And I went through kind of a meditative GOAT process. Next thing you know, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to blow up this day. Guys, there's always circumstances in life that want to take you down, but how do you navigate the adversity? So my friend, that night I like to journal. So that night I went to the beach and I was going to journal on this. And it was super interesting because I believe my phone was stolen, but somehow maybe I dropped the phone and someone picked it up. I don't know. But I went to the beach and I really wanted it stolen. Like, I wanted someone to have stole it from me because then I'm a victim and then it's not my fault. And I got to the beach and I'm thinking about it. And I said, either way, it's my fault. Either way, it's my fault. Res ispa loquitur. The facts speak for themselves. It's my phone. I don't have my phone. And if someone stole it out of the room, did you put it in a safe? Did you lock it up and hide it? So all of a sudden, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to take responsibility, but the blessing is I did. I took responsibility, and my responsibility is security for my stuff. So we immediately went back and secured our website better. We secured our financial, our bank accounts better. And so I learned this great lesson. And the interesting thing is, as I was leaving the resort, the manager came and she said she found the phone. And she said they watched security cameras and I dropped it on the beach. At least that's what she said. But I can tell you, I didn't want to take responsibility. I wanted it stolen. And then I realized it's still my fault no matter what. Taking that responsibility will change your life. And it has changed my life.
On that subject of responsibility, you mentioned your ex-wife. You're clearly an open book, pardon the pun. Out of curiosity, when all this was going down with like your job and your marriage, did it become a blame game where like, oh, the reason I'm struggling at work is because of my wife, and the reason I'm struggling at my marriage is because of my job? At what point, you mentioned that story there, but at what point in your life were you like, I have to stop blaming everything else but me?
Boy, I think that's been a journey. And I think there's certain areas it's easier to take responsibility for than others. I think within a relationship, um, obviously we have to look at ourselves and say, how do we evolve to our best self? But I can tell you, when I was married, um, we had competing interests where I was really dedicated to my career and she was really dedicated to the kids. But we didn't prioritize each other. And were we blaming each other? I'm sure we were. I went through a period, 15 years ago where I was drinking a lot. And that seemed to, no, there's no question that created amazing amounts of stress within our marriage and within my life, my professional life. So me, stopping drinking and really getting control of my life was absolutely essential to the growth and the spiritual development. Like you said, any 12-step program, anything in life, if you don't fully define the problem and own the problem, you can't fix it. Okay. You can't possibly fix your finances if you don't have a detailed inventory of your products. Okay. And, you know, getting, getting away from alcohol, getting sober was absolutely essential for ownership, growth, peace.
You talk about having kids, and I don't have kids, but one thing I always worried about, like, is passing my shit down to them. And we all see this in families, and if you've had siblings, you'll be like, if you see a sibling do this, I'm like, oh, that's so mom. Or you see your brother do that, oh, that's something straight out of dad. With all of the stuff that was kind of compiling in this soup of trauma that you were creating, did you worry? Do you still worry of the things that you've done, the acts you've taken, the way you've performed will have a ripple effect to your kids where like 10 years from now, like, oh boy, same thing dad did, I'm doing it now. And we've all seen the studies about addiction being passed down
Sure.
genetically. But I'm not even getting to that. I'm just talking about in terms of traits and acts. Is that something that's weighed on you?
Well, it's not. It's not. I realize everybody who looks back at their parents draw the good and the bad, and a lot of it's a narrative that we tell about ourselves, and we tell, "Here's my story, and this is how I see it." My mom and dad, they were good parents. There were some struggles, but I look back and go, they did the best they could with the resources they had, and I look at myself, and I was a good dad. I love my kids tremendously. I was not their friend. I was their father. Okay. I wasn't up to be the friend. I was going to prepare them for the zombie apocalypse. And of course, I made mistakes. Of course, I did, especially around the last couple years of my drinking. And do I become concerned about that? Any parent who didn't, um, I think that would be a little bit challenging for me. I want my kids to live the same kind of life I've lived, but try to save them from some of the mistakes. That's it. I have empowered my kids with good minds, strong wills, very, very strong, all three of them being very successful. But there always is the risk that I plant a seed that grew something unhealthy. But there's a lot of love. My ex and I, we get along wonderfully. We co-parent wonderfully, and we're supportive. Like we spent Christmas together and Christmas Eve, and the kids see that united front. So there is always a concern, but then again, there's a lot of love and open communication to do the best I can to heal that.
One more thing about the kids, because you write about missing moments with your children. Is there a moment that still stings that you missed out on because of all the stuff that was going on in your life? Whether it's work related, whether it's with your wife, your alcohol. Is there one moment that you're like, damn man, wish I had a mulligan on that one?
I wouldn't say there was a moment that I miss, but there was a moment where um, I realized the damage caused. So my kids played hockey, really talented hockey players. My one son now coaches at the University of Buffalo, and we went away on a trip with my oldest son, and he might have been 14 at the time, and very very good kid, very well, very respectable. And I just was loud and obnoxious, drinking a little too much, and he kind of yelled at me, and that's never happened before. And I remember after the fact, I know, well, you can't yell at me, but I'm still thinking, boy, I sure must have embarrassed him, and I must have put him in a position that must have made him very uncomfortable. And I'm sure there were more moments like that. Um, but also, I can tell you, my friend, that I was so focused on my career at one point. We were on a family vacation, and because there was this critical care training, I actually left vacation early to attend that training. And when I look at my life and my career, do I regret the sacrifices? I don't. I love medicine and I love caring for patients, I love teaching people, and it's allowed me to serve at a very high level. And the people that I teach, they take care of 2,000-3,000 patients per year. I do think my kids see that, but I also know that there were moments that I didn't appreciate and take advantage of because of peripherals, whether my hobbies, my sports, my fishing, my drinking. Um, and does it weigh on me? I go, I did the best I could. I did the best I could at the time. And even today, I get the privilege of seeing my kids all the time. We have really good relationships, good conversations. Um, but they're through anyone's lives, moments you're like, yeah, Mulligan, I wish I could have taken that one back. I wish I could have done that one better.
There is sort of a fine line of giving yourself grace, which I think enough people don't do, but also ceding responsibility. Is that something that you've had to deal with? Because I wonder, like, the idea, like, when I asked the question about, like, do you worry about, like, you pass shit along to your kids? And you're like, no, because I think I was a good father and love. There is a very fine line between grace and just fluffing off responsibility. Is that something you've had to deal with where you're like, wait, am I giving myself too much grace here? Am I giving myself too much of a break? Because I think we don't give ourselves enough of a break. But obviously, your story is filled with a lot of trauma and a lot of stuff going on in your life. Did you ever have to stop and think like, wait, am I giving myself too much of a break here?
here's my experience. Now, we all have trauma from our past. We all have trauma, some worse than others, but we all have trauma. And can you change the past? Can we change the past? Of course we can't, but can we change the narrative? We could. We could. Absolutely we can. And there've been multiple times in my life where I had to go back and look at past behavior, past situations. Now, when people go and revisit the past, that they relive the emotions, okay? And that can be very unhealthy for some. But if you can go back and relive the past with the frontal part of your brain turned on, that's much more analytical. If you can be in a safe environment, I recommend doing this with counselors. You go back and revisit past trauma and then look at it like you're watching a movie and not reliving it. And, we form narratives at the age we were when we experienced it. Immature oftentimes, and the narrative is faulty and it's super unhealthy. When I was about 18 years old, a guy came into a house with a gun and shot my brother right in front of me. Okay. He didn't die, but he was critically wounded and he lived. And obviously that was very impactful. And, my 18-year-old brain, the conclusion was no one's ever going to get hurt around me again. I'm going to react faster with overwhelming force. And I was always a martial artist and a kickboxer and a fighter. And, I was kind of a traditional martial artist, peace, love, hug a tree. But after that, it was like, if there's a threat, I will neutralize it. And it was very helpful in the Marine Corps and a combat unit. And I, fought full contact in the Marines. I kickboxed for a few years, great, and had some street altercations. But Joe, for me, it also carried into my professional life. And not I use force, but I'd use my mouth. I'd be reactive with my mouth. And until I could go back and relive that and look at that analytically and work through it and realize, there were different lessons than you have to react fast with overwhelming force. The narrative I went back was I came to my brother and I hugged him and I held him until the ambulance came and through like guided meditations, I felt a new narrative. The narrative was I needed you stronger than you would have been if you didn't go through this. And I needed you to heal people. I wanted you to get into medicine. And that's kind of what I felt. And so when it comes to our past, there are a bunch of techniques on how to go back and revisit it and then tell a new narrative. And my friend, when you tell a new narrative, there is that butterfly effect. It changes your identity. It all of a sudden goes, oh. And for me, it's given me a lot of peace. Now I could talk to you about my brother getting shot and not get super emotional. But before I went back and revisited that, talking about it, I would relive it. And now I don't.
That's awesome. Great stuff. Something you write about in the book and something that was very controversial over the last couple of years, and that's masculinity. And, I often joke, John, that humans, and especially Western culture, we're amazing at overcorrection. Like the pendulum swings to extreme sides, rarely in the middle. And I think that's where kind of masculinity has fallen recently in a larger discourse of, throwing around the word toxic masculinity. And obviously, when it comes to masculinity, you're like the poster child of it. How do you operate in a world now where some forms of masculinity are kind of like persona non grata? Like, we want our masculinity, like if there's a fire to be taken out or if there's a battle to be won, we want masculinity there, but keep it there. How do you embrace that now, especially now that you have sons? Obviously masculinity is good, but it could also be bad. It's, again, finding that middle ground. Tell me about your relationship to masculinity.
Before I answer that question, let me just pose a different question and then come back to yours. So if I asked you, what's the difference between influence and manipulation? Like, what's the difference? And for me, it comes down to motive. If I'm trying to do something to serve both of us, well, that's influence, and that's universally acceptable. Manipulation is selfish. It's about me and universally despised. Okay. Now, when it comes to masculinity, being an alpha male, being a strong male, and this is my perspective, is that you know, men need to lead. Men need to lead, whether it's your family, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a business. I feel like today men need to lead. They need to be strong in their mind, in their spirit, in their body. Okay. When it comes to masculinity, um, my big question is what's the motive? Okay. Now, I've seen myself at times in my life be masculine, but it was kind of a selfish motive. And over the last 5, 10 years, when I have a partner that really embraces kind of this feminine submissive side and defers choice to me, it's my honor and privilege to take that. Um, but all of that is in service of her. So, I now thrive in relationships where I do have a woman who trusts me and confide in me, and I'm worthy of that now. And to be a strong leader, whether it's spiritually or emotionally, I found women want today, this is what I'm finding, is that women really want a leader. They want, hey, where do you want to go to eat? No, here's where we're going to go to eat, and this is what time we're going to be there. But also with the caveat that this is not, we're doing what I want to do. Almost always, I pick a restaurant that I believe she would like. I'm always thinking of her. So this masculinity, it's absolutely critical and necessary as long as it's driven in the mindset of service. How can I use the tools that I have? Like a leader as well. If you look at Jim Collins' work on the different levels of being a leader. Now, a level 4 leader is a really good leader, but kind of ego driven, kind of selfish motivated. And yeah, I want to do good, but then say, hey, look at how good this was because I like when I was here. And then when they leave and they don't really pass on the tools to their successor and the business suffers, like, "Ugh, yeah, see, I told you." Where a level 5 leader has this incredible vision, but this humility. Um, so when you can combine masculinity with humility, it becomes a very powerful force. And that is my experience is, you know, find your authentic nature, forge it, forge it. Look at yourselves, look at the deficits, like truly look at where are you falling short? Where are you not the perfect partner? And work towards that. Set that as a goal and behave with integrity. Align your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Um, I feel the world is craving that right now.
That's well said. Really good. It's funny because you had me thinking because the idea of the motivation behind the masculinity, which I think it's something people don't really talk about, and in a way it sort of kiboshes that whole idea of mansplaining. Because I'll be at the gym sometimes, John, and I'll be like, "Oh, that woman over there is doing this move, and she's not doing it right." But if I go over there and say something, am I mansplaining? And for no other reason, I want to help the person, but like we now live in this world where if a man wants to, to give advice to a woman, it's quote unquote mansplaining. And again, I think it all comes down to the motivation. If you're mansplaining to make yourself look like a big shot or to feed your ego, yeah, okay, that's mansplaining. But I don't think you could. It's almost like the toxic masculinity brush. You can't paint everything with that without knowing what the person's motivation is. And then sometimes that requires nuance, which another thing we're not very good at, John, and that is nuance.
Yeah. One of the great tools in my training is to have people understand this premise that coaching without vision is manipulation. Coaching without vision is manipulation. So what does that mean? If I'm going to try to help someone coach them, I better know exactly where they want to go. Like in medicine, if a diabetic comes in, before I start telling them how to take care of themselves, I better say, what do you want from your health? What are your expectations of your disease? And how may I help you? And my job is to educate to some degree, but then realize here are the options. Okay, you really need to eat a low carbohydrate diet and check your sugars 3 times a day. And you got to do this. I really don't want to exert that much energy. Okay, so what do you want to do? So I have found, as I started lecturing, nationally and internationally, I have found that stories are a great way to teach. They're a very, very powerful way to teach. And I had to look at the tools I'm using over the years to go, wait, why am I telling that story? Is that truly to serve the audience, or is it a humble brag? Is like, yeah, okay. And when I would go over to, coach some girl at the gym, what's my motive? Am I trying to be a big shot? Am I trying to meet her? Um, and I have found when I'm in doubt, I'm not sure which one this is. It's better to leave it as it is. I have to be one of the things that I would challenge anybody. This is one of my most powerful tools of growth is the understanding of something as we are not our thoughts, feelings, or emotions. That's not who we are. We are the awareness of those things. We are the awareness of our thoughts, our feelings, and emotions. And when all of a sudden an emotion comes to me, that emotion doesn't possess me. That is a part of me, and I can look at that emotion and separate it. I can detach my ego from it and say, wait. I am triggered. What part of my ego is invested in that? And Joe, I can tell you, man, when you start just kind of honing in this awareness, wait, I'm angry right now. Why am I angry? All of a sudden, it almost makes the emotions disappear because now it's not taking over my whole body. And Joe, a cheat code that I use is ABCD, ABCD. So A is awareness, aware of what you're thinking and what you're feeling. Be aware of it. A, B, breathe. C is stay calm. And D is detach. Detach my ego from this incident. It's been incredibly helpful to me staying grounded and making smart decisions.
That's great. Good stuff. All right. John, I always wrap up these conversations taking folks behind the dedication of the book. And you dedicated to Justin Richardson, a man whose belief in this content ran deeper than words on a page. Tell me why it was important to dedicate it to Justin.
So Justin's my COO, and he's been with me for a number of years through some high times and some really low times. He is the kind of employee that you can't really pay for. He's invested. He would take on projects and even suggest projects that were not in his best interest. If I agreed to it, it would mean a lot of work for him, but it would be good for the business. He had been pivotal in the book. So in the genesis of the book, where we actually hired, again, Mark Levy, he was the marketing director for Simon Sinek, who actually launched his Start With Why program. So this guy is just a genius. And we had multiple calls to refine the content and really make sure it was what spoke to people in a very effective way. I mean, Justin was on every call, highly invested. So Justin has not only been a workhorse between, hey, Justin, I need you to take over the finances. Got it. And you do a good job. Hey, Justin, I need you to take on the marketing. Okay. I got it. Infuse artificial intelligence to make the customer service better. So Justin has been a friend, but a great employee. We've had our highs and lows, but the thing is, we're both men of integrity, and we can talk to each other and tell the truth, the hard truth, but I still look at this guy and think he'd help me hide a body if I needed him. So he's been a very, very good employee. Very, very proud of him. He's a great husband and father, and he's been a wonderful team, member of my team.
Awesome. Well, you can read all about it and How to Correct Your Life, Practical Tools for Those Who Lead, Fight, and Build. His name is John Bielinski Jr. John, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Joe, thanks, brother. I really appreciate you.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about John and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.